Before I begin, I'd like to point out that I come from gaming studies. I started looking at video games in the beginning of the year 2000 when game studies were created. So I monitored the evolution of game studies throughout my career. So my presentation is from the point of view of game studies. If I started looking into gambling, is that I started witnessing gamification of video games. I saw gambling mechanisms that were more and more widespread in the gaming world. So that's why I started looking into the gaming sector, the gambling sector, that is. Then I also started studying data collection around 2010, where I worked on a Facebook game. I started exploring the dynamic of data collection related to video games. And you'll see there's a strong connection between video games and data collection. Just to give you a quick history of data collection, in the 1980s, it was a manual data collection process with the different household consoles, and developers would communicate with gamers through written letters. There would be different mailing lists with gamer communities, and the data collection was manual and minimal. In the 1990s, we saw the appearance of Triple W, and we saw the appearance of multiplayer role-playing games, like you could see on the screen. And new models were put in place with id Software, with Doom game, which provided the first level of the game for free to the gamers, and the following levels were sent directly to the players without going through a big industry player. So we saw how gaming started to dematerialize. At the turn of the century, we saw new standards. We saw new platforms that were created, like Steam, that imposed a new model. All sorts of consoles that are connected online, where it's possible to share data. We saw mobile devices starting to connect with games, and small games and leisure games that reached a new generation of gamers with Farmville and other similar games, and also digital social media that started collecting big data on gamers, and gamers would produce a lot of textual information on games. Around 2010, we started to see a shift towards the quantitative data, where there was a possibility and the capacity to collect big behavioral data, where there's an accelerated dematerialization of games. So games are no longer sold on CD-ROMs, but games that would become dematerialized, and it would be games that were no longer products but services, where there'd be constant updates. Therefore, large players needed to collect data to see how the game is used and to see what would be the best way to update the game. And there'd also be data on the game balance to make sure the game functions correctly. But data is also collected on consumption. This started to blur the lines in terms of the data that was collected. We could see full dematerialization of games with online sale platforms, and the profile of gamers completely exploded. So almost everybody now plays, be it even for trivial games like Candy Crush or other games with Pokemon Go that changed the model. And then by the end of the 2010s, we see the cloud shift with Stadia. We now see games as a service. It's a full dematerialization of games and an imposition of social media. This led us to the heart of the industry based on data. Today, I'd like to focus on games on mobile platforms. So if we look at mobile platforms, sales It's not always easy to find data that is not produced by the industry itself, but it would be nearly half of video game sales that are done through mobile devices. And again, this information comes from the industry, but there would be a growing consumption of games on mobile platforms. So these are the games that have the strongest growth compared to the overall game market. And this should continue. I will show you some models, some business models of games on mobile platforms to see where games with advertising fit in. We have the sold games premium. There are the free-to-play games. They all have the free-to-play games all the way to pay-to-win. Normally, games should be free and should be able to progress in the game with time spent on the game. But in some games, the time is so long, it requires so much effort to reach some levels or to acquire some material in the game. And in a subtle way, gamers are led to pay to progress in the game. And some games really upset the gamer community because it was impossible to play if you didn't pay. And this has a very bad perception in the gaming community in the pay-to-win games. There are some hybrid models where part of the game is free and part needs to be paid for. And this is where I talk about free games, but with advertising and the interface with the banners, but there also be advertising included in the game design. There are free games with advertising that appears between different gaming sessions. There will be games with advertising integrated in the design. This is something very specific. It's part of the gameplay to obtain life points or energy points. Some games will function this way. You need energy for some specific actions. And once you're out of energy, you have to wait. But if you're ready to wait, you'll watch the advertising. And this will have an impact on the gameplay. And this will trivialize the presence of advertising in the game with a strong presence in many games. There's contextual advertising. There are free games with payment to eliminate or delete advertising. And there's also advertising games where ad companies create games. Instead of paying for a 30-minute spot on TV, they will create a game where the logo is very present, or there would be a theme that is present in the game. And instead of having 30 seconds of an ad, you can be exposed for many hours to the advertising. So these can become very powerful advertising tools compared to a 30-second spot on TV. This leads us to a model that is slightly more complicated. I will take my time to explain this. I wanted to introduce this model. You will understand during my presentation that this becomes dominant, and this new business model and economic model reveals what happens behind the scenes with games with advertising. So the model is a game distribution platform with a loyalty program and a reward program. I took the example of Misplay. On the consumer side, you go to Misplay where there's a game library. You create your Misplay account and you play the games offered by Misplay. By playing, you earn rewards or points. And these points can be traded for discounts on Amazon and elsewhere. So you play and you earn money. That's how it's presented. On the developer side, the benefit of dealing with Misplay is to have a showcase for some games. With the multiplicity of games, some games are just go unnoticed. So you can have access to loyal Misplay gamers. And Misplay will acquire games with this showcase. So there's acquisition, retention, and monetization. So there's acquisition of new gamers, retention, and then there's the monetization through advertising. So if you look at the gamer side for this platform, you create an account, you go to the library, and when you play, you'll have a message that says welcome, and each time you play, you earn points. On the gamer side, there seems to be benefits. On the other hand, you have to open your cell phone and open your data because the platform has to know what the games you're playing to send the points. And there's a part of this data that is shared. And that's where you have to understand the way the system works. And this is why I'm using this example where you have all sorts of offers of game distribution platforms like Misplay. It could be a Cashy, Money Raw, which are all the same as Misplay. But we try to see the developers, and this all leads us to Just Dice. Just Dice creates all these different platforms, and you might wonder why, but you come to realize that Just Dice belongs to Apply, which is Apply, which developed Just Dice that was created for advertising. It's a platform that allows to earn or to win loyal gamers and to use their data to create user profiles to be able to use advertising space. So AppLake also has a company that's called Adjo that sells gamer profiles to companies that would like to expose them to advertising. So it's an umbrella company. And they have a third company that develops games. So they develop games, they present these games on platforms where they will ensure gamer loyalty. They will trace these gamers and create gamer profiles. When players play, it's not a single platform that will generate data and accumulate the data. The data will be funneled to the same company, so there will be profiling done. And there's a third company where they offer these profiles where it's possible to create targeted advertising. And if you read the user profiling, all this follows the GDPR, the European law on the protection of personal data. They provide a developer kit that has the ability to read users' installed apps and app usage. This data allows us to work with partners to identify and then build campaigns that target their most valuable users. In other words, the partners are the third parties that we often see and the user conditions and terms. So data collection has been going on for some time, and this trivializes the practices. I spoke about Steam. When the platform was launched, all the information on all gamers was open. So gamers would say how many games they had, how many time they spent playing, what level they're at, what they earn, and all this information was shared in a trivial way. So there's a certain normalization of data sharing among gamers. And we all know that with smartphones, be it Apple or Android, we know that gaming development software, such as Unity, they also provide kits to install in these games that were developed where data collection will happen and the data will be centralized to the system and help developers to see how their game is used. Some data is essential for the game. For instance, the developers have to know if the game is working well, if everything's functioning, if there are some bugs, they need to collect some data for the game balance. But now it's even broader, where the data will be collected broadly. And it's not only the game developers that collect the data, but it will be all the systems and all the advertising services that are either sold or integrated in the game design provided by third parties. And the third parties are not submitted to the game usage terms. We'll collect a lot of data on all games, and we'll centralize these profiles and create very specific gamer profile to sell targeted advertising. And you'll also see how data collection was created was created as a game. You have Mimoto that looks like a game, but it's a social network where a lot of questions are asked: what food you like, what games you like, and this would create huge information profiles. And Nintendo was accused by gamer communities that they were doing more or less disguised monitoring and surveillance. What type of data is collected? I won't go through all of them, but you can imagine the different type of data that is collected. And you can see geolocalized data. And if I insist on geolocalized data, it's the most expensive or the most valuable data, which allows people to know where you live, where you shop, and therefore it is very easy to target the advertising to specific users. There will be connections encouraged by game applications on personal data on Facebook, because there's a door open on data collection through that social network. Massive data or big data could be collected through opening in a Facebook account through the game application, and that's not why we insist so much on this. It is often disguised as a measure to be more user-friendly, but it's another way to collect information on your social network. There's also another platform to connect through social networks, and I will present this strategy a bit later. I spoke about gamer acquisition, but there's also gamer retention. In video games, the retention factor and the most important retention factor for an online game are others. It's the community, it's the other gamers. And to connect the community is another way to ensure a higher success rate and a higher retention rate of gamers on the platform, because of this motivation related to social networks. So this is a double advantage to make our lives easier by connecting through our social media account. Now, where we see the loophole is through the third parties. If you read carefully the fine prints, it will be said that the company only collects the data for the proper usage of the application, that the developers need this information to make sure that the game works correctly. But there's always a section on third parties. And who's included in third parties? There's a list. And what I pay attention to are different marketing specialists and advertisers. In my opinion, there's not much regulation on this. And this is where we're completely opening our platforms through our mobile devices to big data collection, to advertising and marketing specialists. And this is completely legal. When you gamers use games, there are the terms of use, the privacy protection. We click accept, but there's a Norwegian study in 2016 that attempted to assess which applications were downloaded regularly on a mobile device and calculated how long it would take to read the terms of use. And it was an average of 24 hours of reading. And this is not material that's easy to read. So people click through the conditions without really knowing what the conditions are. If you look here at Brawl Stars, there's an age that is asked and you confirm, but in fine print, it says, if you click confirm, it's that you accept the privacy policy, which is a more or less legitimate way to ask the user to confirm the terms of use. And if you read them once, you won't read them 3, 4, or 5 times. So you will automatically accept the updates to the terms of service. This is always presented to improve the game experience. Obviously, developers need this data to improve the game experience, but for advertising spaces, the companies that make money on advertising will say, well, we improve your experience by targeting advertising that could interest you. So your experience would be better because you're going to have advertising that could interest you. Ethically, this is very questionable, but this is how it's presented. On a cell phone that never had a casino app, I installed a casino app, and other games that had nothing to do with this appeared in my other apps. This appeared in my weather network app, and I started to see casino advertising on the application of this smartphone. And the weather network of Meteo Media, other app, was collecting a lot of geolocalization data and had a massive data on user traveling and commutes. So you see, it's not a theoretic system. The system is very real, and it's connected to our whole ecosystem of our mobile device. And now you can see the loop. We have free games installed. On the free games, there's the developer section, and developers include a section for advertising that will be managed by third parties that have different terms of use. These third parties will collect on different game platforms data. We'll create more and more specific gamer profiles. We'll sell these gamer profiles to companies that want to target their advertising, and the targeted ads will be sent to our game application. So we'll continue to play for free, and you can see how this creates a loop. AppLike creates both the games, the game platform, and they also own the company that will sell the targeted advertising and profiles. So they are able to close the loop with their system. How is it possible to create such specific profiles? We all have an ad ID, an advertising identifier on our mobile device. By default, this is permanent. As consumers or as citizens, if we do not change the settings of the ad ID, it will stay. It will work this way. And this is both on an Android device or an iPhone. And this is how companies can target and create profiles on our consumption habits and on our commutes. This also has to do with customizing offers. Gamer psychological profiles are now being created. So if there's a drop in your gaming practices at a certain time, maybe you'll be offered a reward to incite you to spend more time. Or if you're on the verge of doing a microtransaction to purchase some elements, you might obtain an offer. In the next hour, you'll have a 25% discount if you purchase something. These mechanisms have existed for a long time in the video games, such as World of Warcraft, where there was a drop of motivation for players that were going towards level 40. And then all of a sudden, you'd get a new steed, and then this would incite players to continue. So it's the game platform that knows what to offer to encourage gamers to keep playing. Yesterday, there were also presentations on gamers that spent to play. The statistics come from the industry, but it seems as a small portion of players will pay, but will pay a lot to become whales. And it only takes a few players to spend a lot for the game application to be profitable. Then at that time, if you can create very specific psychological profiles, then you can exploit these gamers to make these games profitable. For data collection, you need to increase the connection time. We have an economy of attention. Our attention is worth a lot. So there are all sorts of strategies with the different stimuli to seize our attention. There's social acceleration now. There's no lost time. Now, every moment can be used, even while we're commuting or in our most intimate moments. Our data can be used. And there's also affect capitalism. Different actors and stakeholders will try to also exploit this. These are challenges and issues that we covered yesterday, so I would go through this quickly, but I'd like to go into a bit more detail, especially concerning design. To increase the collection time, there's persuasive design that is part of persuasion technology. What are we trying to persuade us with to keep us connected? You probably know the infinite scroll. Infinite scroll is not trivial. This is intentional to keep us connected as long as possible. We thought we'd spend only 2 minutes, but you spend an hour scrolling. YouTube will keep playing videos back to back. Also, notifications. These are all strategies that you're familiar with. Persuasive design also targets engagement. That's the buzzword that will appear in marketing as of 2010 and after, where engagement is very important to keep people engaged with brands and mobile platforms. There's a strong connection between gamification and engagement. So there are different game strategies and gamification strategies to keep people connected and linked to data collection. There are different persuasive design strategies used, such as positive reinforcement, which is easy to imagine, but there's also negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement, you do something, you'll be rewarded. And negative reinforcement, if you don't do anything, you will lose something. So if you don't harvest, you will lose your produce. So there are all sorts of strategies to make you use to connect frequently to progress in the game.
The rewards in time, they will appear, and you have to be connected. And also the content you have heard about an application where there are coffers with the so we open, and if it is an element that where we have a form of compulsory tendency, now it's the design, the time of recharging when you have points of action who are here, the little blue spots. We cannot, so we have to buy or we have to wait. And it lasts 3 hours, and the player loses the action, and he loses all the products. And there are many elements. You have offers that are presented, but if it's just 1 minute you lose, you have to they create a habit to constantly be connected. And the first day, the day 2, day 3, and people these are pernicious because the rewards, it's not, we go back and we have to go back to day 1. If you are not, if you go to 2, 3, and if you are not there on the 4th, you lose. So the whole week they create the habit on the player. And also the chronometric offers, also the visual, they put people in competition. You have to be sure that the retention of the player is going to develop. You have to have they understood this system with Facebook platforms with your friend. Your friend has reached this level and he's doing better than you, and you have to send your point of view to your friend. So the collection mechanisms. Many people want to do everything, want to complete everything. They want to have all the elements, and also there is a blurring of the frontiers that is very clever, and it is semiotic, and it is integrated in the play. And here we have a little coffer, and you end up in an island, and you get points of action, and you can continue. Also, it's a blurring of frontiers with the social network, also with the gambling and gaming. More and more, we see more and more in games that have no link with gambling. So we have a mechanism that is very banalized and normalized, and it is mechanics that is connected to. We talked about that yesterday. The studies on gambling, there are rewards that are going to be presented. You have real and also virtual, and it's constant. And for the player, sometimes it's difficult to see the difference. What I am interested in is when it becomes a language form, gamblification. We recognize how the information is presented, and you don't have to be there's will be not necessary to explain. Here in Quebec, that is when it's very one of the restaurants is called Déroule. It's roll your border of the little coffee cup. You have no price, or you have a very big price. More and more, you have the physical roll up, and we have to play the application to see if we gain, and sometimes we win, sometimes we don't, and you have to go and buy to in the restaurant to make the wheel turn again. And this is very much normalized in this. It's written 13 years and more. So you have all the problems, the big problems of addiction, and also the private life destruction, or the redefinition of the social space. We understand all the problems that I hope that I have to have promoted a little bit of indignation about this situation and what we are going to go. And games is very motivating, and there are lots of rewards, and people like that, and um, they profit of all to bring all the mechanism for the circulation of publicity, and they make us do. It's a procedural rhetoric, and we will perform actions in our habits, such as being connected constantly. Everything is exactly explained for games for children as small as 3 years old. We will have it's mechanics of gambling, and also random. We will have a combination of collection and random mechanism. Children will have all these cute animals, but to have these cute animals, you have to open a little. So you have you open balls, and you open balls, and you buy and you buy and you buy, and So the child is brought to consume through this mechanism to have all the integrality of all the little animals. And in Quebec, there is a legislation that was put forward, and no publicity has to address to the child directly, because the address to a child is too strong, and by this toy. There are lots of rules of laws but there is nothing about. We can let people play for hours and hours, and this is banalized, and it's accepted, and publicity. There's going to be micro translations, transactions. Uh, you have games for children as small as 3 years old, and if you want to have a star, if you want to have a new truck, look at the publicity. It's the same system that is working behind. It's your subscription. You have 3 days free, and then you have $1 per week, and this is goes very fast. You see a little bit the whole strategies and the designs of persuasion towards gambling, to publicity, to data collection. Look at any game for children now. You will see little games. There's all the mechanisms are present here with all the negative effects. But for children that are developing, that are being trained, and I couldn't stop to say the last word. So it's complètement, everything is completely free. We wonder what kind of how free are things. There is also a self-regulation of industry to concerning the classification. In Quebec, you have the board of the cinema board, where children can block what child can, what age, but the companies themselves will have to put their the year in. So you heard about the coffers with treasure coffer for very little children, with this treasure coffer that will be allowed, and there's no legislation. We will talk of the content about the violence, sexuality, but not on the mechanisms that are going to be used. So regulation, how it is built, it's on the direction of the OCDE, where we see that it is when you collect the data, it's you have to protect the data, you have to protect the people. There are a couple of principles that are going to be on which our legislation is going to be inspired. So we will have one of the law on the electronic documents, also in Quebec, the protection of personal data. Also in Quebec, we have two laws. In the United States, you have different laws, and it's not because they have more. These are very precise, so there are many empty holes. So one of the Europe is the general regulation on the data protection. In North America, so the European law will have an effect on North American enterprises. what is about how the regulation for collection of data for children. In Canada, it's also the European. We don't make a distinction between the children. It's going to be the same regulatory principles, and also in the United States, the children online privacy. This should, so there are many ways of avoid. One of the examples you see here, it's a little games that are presented visually. We are talking about children from 3 years old through 13 on the conditions. It's written if you accept the condition, if you are you have to be 13. So this is not the COPA that is going to intervene, but it's going to be on a much restrictive regulation for children. There's a kind of hypocrisy, but in this the condition of use, if you click this, that it's because you have 13, you are 13 years old. Also about the classification, there there's for ESRB, you will have early childhood, but and everyone, all the children is for everyone. And this is from the 2018. The childhood, early childhood was disappeared because it was not being used. And why? They removed that because early childhood was more restrictive than the other regulations. Also, we have to tackle but the developers could avoid some regulations from Google by putting it on a family. And there are lots of strategies to avoid the little regulation that is for to protect children, until Tiny Lab was caught with by collecting data on children. So it was denounced and was there had a justice action. Also, you have educational games, like in Google, you have this classification, and even in educational games, you have publicity, you will have data collection, you will have through with third parties, like exactly the same as for adults. So you don't have a rating that will protect on concerning these systems. On the education value, the collection system. So you have you start to see how it works. All these you have third parties that will collect data and will accumulate these profiles with Google, and they will have the sales service with publicity agents, and they will collect this data and they will keep them in database, and will have very precise profiles, and will sell these profiles to publicity enterprise. So they are starting to collect data for very young children, with all the manipulation that adults can do on children. These data they will, and we wonder what kind of life we are giving to our children, with everything, and with a restaurant, what are the information that we collect? We don't collect any, but the third parties, yes, they collect. So it's a system that is very well implanted, very well well organized, and it's not hidden. It is totally open, and you can see the sites of these services. And we have here super awesome that will have applications for children, and they don't hide, and they talk about kids advertisement, and they will have awesome ads for publicity for developers, and all. There's a whole system uh, with development kits that are very well organized, and they will. There's. I just arrive, and I join this system, and they have all the information on children, on adults, and so the European law, it doesn't, they are not violating any law, because the system allows the use of such of data. And there's Epic Games is the enterprise that does super awesome, and this is Tencent, is the biggest game, is a Chinese. It's a mastodon, and we see that in video analysis, I will show you with apply. We have the impression that many enterprise, but there's only a few ones that centralize all the data, and this is with all these data, all these information source. We create very precise profiles that will have effects on adults and also on children. And I would end that we protect. It is about time that we protect our children.